convict President Donald Trump in his impeachment trial. GOP Senator Bill Cassidy, Louisiana, sent packing by Republican voters as he ran for re-election. This primary was Saturday. He did an interview prior to, I think it was Saturday, in fact. He was on Fox, and he was asked if you knew then what you know now regarding the Russian hoax, how it was all a setup and that there was no truth to it, and it was part of an effort to sabotage the Trump presidency. And when it came to Ukraine, that the fact that he was right on top of corruption in terms of perhaps seeing it, discovering it, and the conversation he had with Zelensky, and how Trump was 100% absolutely correct. Cassidy was asked, would you still have voted to convict? And he wouldn't answer the question. Now, I don't know whether that would have altered the outcome. Probably not, given 75% of Republicans voted against him. And he tried to play this card, about looking forward and said, I'm a doctor. When you're a doctor, you just make decisions and move forward. But if you're a doctor and you colossally screw up a diagnosis, do you not go back and try to figure out what you did wrong so you don't do it again? With most results tabulated at or into Saturday night, early Sunday morning, you had the congresswoman backed by Trump, Letlau, stood at 45% of the vote. Louisiana State Treasurer John Fleming with roughly 28%, and Cassidy just under 25%. And Louisiana, like a lot of other states, has runoff. It's not jungle, but it is a runoff state. So the top two vote getters, none of which are the incumbent Cassidy, will face off against one another. This, like the Indiana races, gets painted as the direct result of the power that Donald Trump has in these primaries. But I still do not believe that it is as much the power of Donald Trump saying vote for this person instead of that one, but the reasons he says it. I think, again, this is just an example like Indiana. Republican voters are tired of losers. And they're tired of being betrayed by their elected officials. They are tired of what appears to be echoes of the past Republican Party before Donald Trump, in which Republicans are just essentially relegated to loser status. Republican voters are constantly told, well, you have to understand why we can't do it. And just because Democrats do it, that doesn't mean that we should do it. And that is what I believe with the gerrymandering situation has reared its head in Indiana specifically, because you've got, this is part of what people liked about Donald Trump, what Republicans liked about Donald Trump. My entire adult voting life, I had the message essentially was, be it spoken or otherwise, you just have to suck it up as a Republican and recognize that Democrats are going to cheat and Democrats are going to play dirty, and that means losing, and they're going to call you names, and you just have to accept it because we're better than them. And Donald Trump came along and said, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be a loser. You don't have to sit back with one hand tied behind your back, a self-imposed knot, while Democrats skate around the rules or utilize the rules to their own advantage, gerrymandering being one of those examples, in which they constantly alter the landscape to benefit them. And Republicans, again, though gerrymandering wasn't something that never was taken advantage of by Republicans, but just on the whole, the different set of rules, the double standard, And for a very long time, we heard Republicans complain about the double standard without recognizing that a double standard takes two sides. It takes one side to play by a separate set of rules, and then the other side to decide, yeah, we're going to let you play by a separate set of rules. When it came to the impeachment of Donald Trump, and someone like Cassidy voting to convict, it wasn't so much about the fact that it was Donald Trump as much as it was about the voters, that this was an attack on the voters, that this was once again here a member of the Republican Party and knuckling under to the Democrats because of whatever reasons. Generally, for the Republican voter, the Republican voter infers that it's because of weakness. It is a desire to be loved by the elites. It is just a lack of conviction. It's just gross. And while the voting recommendations of Donald Trump, the endorsements of Donald Trump, obviously it does hold some sway, but I think that driving force, that it is an anger. It is a level of disgust that gets Republicans out there whenever somebody like a Cassidy or so many of these other establishment Republicans are constantly lecturing us on how we have to behave differently and how we just have to deal with it and that we just have to accept certain losses and this whole, refusal to bring up and tackle this save ID, the requirement for an ID to be shown in order to vote in the federal elections is just another example of it, and why I believe that you don't have necessarily a very enthusiastic voter base right now, unless it's the ability to take out somebody that is one of the old school surrender Republicans. I believe the race in Kentucky, which tomorrow's the primary in Kentucky, and this is the Massey race, and Donald Trump has been really battling Thomas Massey. And so I'm finding this to be very interesting because Massey is different. So you have the Trump versus Massey component in it, but Massey doesn't come off as a wimp. Massey does not come off as an establishment Republican that is constantly telling the voters why, as Republicans, they have to surrender. Which is why you don't have the challenger running away with it in the polls, I suspect. In fact, according to the polls, it's a toss-up. Looking at Real Clear Politics, a number of the different polls. There's a Qantas Insight poll that was taken from April 6th through the 7th, and it had Massey up by 9. Then a big data poll, the 3rd through the 7th, again, this is April, Massey up by 4. Then you had another Qantas Insight poll over a month after it showed Massey up by 9, and it showed the challenger up by 8. Then another big data poll, this time just a couple of weeks ago, the 12th through the 14th, or I guess this would have even just been last week, showed Massey up by 2. Then there's another big data poll, the 14th through the 16th, showed it a tie. And now a SoCal Strategies poll showing Galrian, I'm not sure how to pronounce the challenger's name, but he's up by 7. So if you look at the rolling average, it's straight up 50-50 right now. And I believe the reason that it is so close is here he is an incumbent, very, very difficult to unseat. Clearly, the only reason that he is in any sort of danger is because Donald Trump really, really, really wants him out of there. But the reason it's not a given at this point is because Massey doesn't come across as a weakling. He isn't that disgusting. You may disagree with the things that he says, but he's not kowtowing to the left. He's not kowtowing to the establishment and constantly explaining to the voters why it is that we just have to reach across the aisle and all that stuff that Republican voters have come to reject in the world of Donald Trump. That's going to be That's going to be a real interesting one to watch play out. So that primary will be tomorrow. So when I note that I don't believe that it is 100% just Donald Trump saying, here's the guy or the gal you want, it's the reasons behind that, which to me is important because that means that when Donald Trump goes away, that Donald Trump voter is not necessarily willing to just go back to the way that it was before. And depending on who ends up driving the Republican Party train, that's either going to be good or bad for the Republican Party. Because if, as the establishment is already trying to do, they regain control, I don't think they're going to fare very well in many of these elections. And the Democrat Party's complete insanity is probably going to be their best friend when it comes to many of these elections, just driving people to vote for Republicans, although they aren't necessarily enthusiastic about it, but they are fearful of the insanity within the Democrat Party. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. I want a great homeloan.com. You got home loan needs, you got the Carrickers and the team. And as things, we talked with Alex Carricker on Friday, and he says, there are just more people that are tipping their toe in or dipping their toe in the market and deciding now is the right time to go ahead and make the move. Is it for you? I don't know. Here's the other thing he talked about, how sometimes and dealt with a client recently that had they got behind on the mortgage payments, and it got to where it was too late, and so you can find yourself in a situation where you have no options other than foreclosure and being without a home. And if you do think that you're getting yourself in that position or you're just getting close to it, reach out to the Carrickers and their team and say, what are the options here? Because reverse mortgages potentially could be something that can help save you from losing your home, refinancing, or even if it means selling your home in order to get into something smaller or renting for a while until you get back on your feet. It can help save you from, while it's not an ideal situation, the worst situation, and that is being without a home and having that problem on your credit score for the years that it will follow you. So reach out, utilize them and their services, and of course, for all of your home loan needs, I want a greathomeloan.com because you do.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll have a chance for showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 85. Tonight, a 30% chance for showers with a low around 70. For your Tuesday, a 90% chance for rain with a high near 79. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly cloudy skies with a high near 67.
California Republicans showing a sharp increase in early primary turnout ahead of the state's upcoming gubernatorial primary, according to newly released ballot return data. Figures from research firm Political Data Inc. show that 905,000 plus ballots had already been returned as of Saturday. Republicans accounted for 37% of those ballots. That marks an 11-point increase compared with the same stage of the 2022 midterm cycle. Democrats accounted for 41% of returned ballots, which is down 13 points from the equivalent point 4 years ago. Independent and other voters made up 20%, which is up slightly, numbers suggesting a significantly more energized Republican electorate in a state long dominated by Democrats. Political data vice president Paul Mitchell telling the New York Post that Republican voters may be returning to traditional early voting habits after years in which President Trump and some other Republican figures raised concerns about mail voting. Mitchell telling the Post Republicans are potentially returning their ballots at a pre-2020 rate before Trump and other leaders discouraged it. He also suggested some Democrats may be delaying their vote for tactical reasons, saying some Democrats are holding onto their ballot to make sure their vote isn't wasted so that they get to vote for someone that makes it into the top two. County level breakdowns circulated on social media appear to show Republicans outperforming their registration share across much of the state. The strongest turnout so far coming from older voters. Californians age 65 and over account for 54% of the ballots returned, while voters age 18 to 34 account for only 10%. Mitchell noting the demographic pattern is typical of lower turnout elections where habitual voters dominate early voting. Of course, the two big races right now, all eyes are on the gubernatorial race, and then there is that Los Angeles mayoral race as well. And I suspect part of it may also be Republicans actually see an opportunity that one of the Republicans will be on the ballot in the general election. There oftentimes isn't a reason for Republicans in the jungle primary of California to get that excited because Republicans don't tend to make it on the ballot for the general election on some of these bigger races. And so the fact that at least one, and for a period of time it looked like two, which is why they forced Swalwell out, was to stop the Democrats from thinning out the Democrat votes. And it seems to have worked in terms of numbers. They've established that, and their goal is, as long as there is a Democrat on the ballot, we will make sure that we get the governor's mansion again, and time will tell on that. And still, with all of the, Los Angeles, about 80% Democrat voters there. I think less than 20%. I think it's 18, 19 Republican voters in the Los Angeles area, and this Spencer Pratt situation is, again, drawing a lot of attention, and I just do not feel, if he does not win, that is a huge loss overall, because he is serving a tremendous purpose of showing the rest of the country how bad things look when Democrats have complete and total control, and how they will continue to vote for their own destruction. Now Pratt, in terms of what he would be able to do as mayor, facing a council filled with left-wingers, I'm not sure the authority, how much authority. I mean, surely it's got to be some management authority that he would have in terms of mayor, but I think people are going to potentially be very disappointed if he doesn't win. Again, massively uphill battle. And that's even if Democrats don't cheat. He's got an uphill battle. So you throw in their history of cheating, stuffing ballot boxes, finding ballot boxes when they need to find ballot boxes filled with ballots at the last minute. It just makes the likelihood of Spencer Pratt winning very, very small. But I just don't want people to be that upset or crestfallen, because it will be, again, a demonstration to the American people that Democrats do not pivot towards better governance. We are at a point with the Democrat Party in which the Clinton era was an era in which they lost big, and so under the leadership of Bill Clinton, recalculated themselves, moderated themselves to some degree, recognized that they were rejected, and so they said, okay, we'll fix ourselves. We were the problem. We will change ourselves in hopes of regaining your trust. The Democrat Party does not do that any longer. The Democrat Party just tells you that you are a racist and you are a Nazi, and that you're just bad. You're just a bad person. And it all all the eggs are in the basket of good versus evil, and it doesn't matter how poor the results are. It does not matter. I mean, you can have thousands and thousands of people lose their home in a fire. And as the mayor of LA, knowing that this was in all likelihood going to be a problem, but still flew off to some other country while wildfires were raging, eating up homes and killing people. She's at a cocktail party, knowing that this is happening. Went radio silence. Then refuses to take any responsibility for it. Not to mention the homelessness and the human feces everywhere and the needles out in the... I mean, you just lay at the crime issue. Spencer Pratt drawing national attention to, listen, this is what it looks like when Democrats have control. And then if, again, the Democrats with their numbers turn out and vote and say this is the direction we want to keep going, I think that that's a very stark warning to the American people that, you know, once you go Democrat any longer, that there are people who will just double down, and regardless of how they destroy the city you live in, how they destroy your quality of life, they will keep marching towards that destruction. And hopefully that'll frighten some people into thinking twice when they're trying to make their decision. Speaking of, Nithya Raman, she is the socialist council member. She has come up with her latest plan in the context of the Palisades fire. And it is to consider banning backyard barbecues. Because that's clearly the problem here. Let's get a traffic update, details on this. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Los Angeles City Councilwoman and Democratic mayoral candidate Nithya Raman on Wednesday introduced a motion directing city officials to consider banning backyard barbecues during red flag warning days when high winds and dry conditions may create extreme fire danger. The move, immediately torched by Democrats and Republicans alike, is yet another example of government incompetence, with critics slamming her for suggesting that restricting a common weekend activity could somehow make up for the lack of preparedness caused by left-wing extremist policies in the state. Democrat Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez said the last thing Angelenos need is a ban on hosting a carne asada in their own backyards. We're not checking the weather for red flag conditions because before planning a backyard barbecue. This is what families do: birthday parties, carne asada, family gatherings. A lot of people barbecue. And that's particularly prevalent in the Hispanic community. It's a very big cultural constant of having friends and families over in large volume and cooking outdoors. Democrat Councilwoman Rodriguez added, how about, Ms. Rahman, focus on enforcing against the encampments that are the majority source of our fires instead of singling out residential neighborhoods and folks having backyard barbecues. See, this is a symptom of having a multimillionaire run for the mayor of Los Angeles, somebody that her husband is part of the Hollywood elite, he's a producer or something. She probably knows culturally about as much regarding backyard grilling as Chuck Schumer did when he had those frozen patties with cheese laying on top of them on a grill. Not to mention, this is not what causes these fires. Most recently, the Palisades by a left-wing activist who wanted to punish the rich because the rich are gobbling up all of the resources and the rich are preventing the poor from getting a break. It was somebody that bought into the Democrat rhetoric. And this is good for Spencer Pratt. It is good for Americans throughout the country to see this. It is the elites who do not live the same way that the rest of us do, coming up with these ideas that will in no way, shape, or form actually solve the massive problems that exist. Everyone knows. It was lack of preparedness. Everyone knows it was one boneheaded decision made after another in the lead up to the fires and in terms of dealing with the fires, and that included making DEI hires. But to the point I made earlier, the Democrat Party is no longer a party that says, listen, we screwed up. It's clear that the policies, the approach that we took was a mistake. So we're going to not do that anymore. Instead, they double down. Now, you do, because of the jungle primary situation here, have some Democrats that are Karen Bass supporters that are coming out swinging at her, but that's the only reason that they are pushing back and noting what a ludicrous idea, and again, with the very heavily Hispanic population in Los Angeles and barbecuing out being so significant to just the daily life and culture of Hispanic neighborhoods and the Hispanic community. You combine all of that together, and you could see why it is that some of these Democrats are calling her out for this. It's really funny because she's like a lot of these women who run as Democrats. When they first get introduced, they're presented as, this very exciting, brilliant individual, and it turns out that they're not very bright, generally speaking. Whether it is a Stacey Abrams or an Ocasio-Cortez or a Naitha Rahman, and oftentimes it's because they haven't had to prove themselves based off merit. And when you are an individual that will be promoted and selected because of anything other than the job that you've actually done, so for example, your skin color or your sexual orientation or your gender, you then tend to not be an individual that has honed any sort of meaningful skills. And then when you are put out on a national stage or a larger stage, you look like a complete idiot because you're out of your element. Speaking of, there's a Democrat, a female Democrat, congressional candidate it's either Michigan or Minnesota, whose social media marketing of herself as a candidate is comprised of twerking and utilizing crass and filthy language. She's a white liberal, which, as you know, white female liberals are the absolute worst. This isn't old postings that have been dug up since prior to her announcement that somebody went back and found a bunch of cringeworthy postings that she had made on social media. This is part of her campaign. She's an idiot. And the more attention she gets and the more mocking and criticism she gets from Republicans, the better she will do. Because Democrats have taken to voting for Democrats that they feel Republicans hate the most. And because the individuals that Republicans don't necessarily hate the most, but the Democrats that get so much focus from Republicans are doing so because they're complete and utter failures. I mean, that's what you do. You point out the political opposition when they fail. And so by default, what's occurring is you have Democrats flocking to the biggest losers. Hence, the two top popular Democrats to become the presidential nominee at this point, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom. Two of the biggest high-profile failures if you look at the actual resume in the Democrat Party. But they also get the most scorn. They also get the most mockery. They're perceived by Democrat voters as being hated, and oh boy, those Republicans will really stick it to them by choosing this individual. It's not the best way to pick leadership. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Ozark's elder law, it is oftentimes very alluring to hear ads that say for $199 you can do your own will, you can do your own trust. And just right out of the gate, recognizing that every state has their own separate laws in terms of dealing with wills and trusts. So the idea of one size fits all right out of the gate lets you know that's kind of a red flag. Plus, people go to school for a very long time. You know how law is. You know how government is. It's not very simple. It's overly complicated. oftentimes completely unnecessarily. And so the idea that for just a couple $100 you could do this yourself is just not a good idea. Do not do that. Ozarks elder law. You think, but I'm going to hire him, and then it's going to take 10 billable hours to see what I need to do, and that's Lord knows how much per hour. The consultation is a courtesy provided to you because they don't want cost to be an obstacle when it comes to the ultimate decision. Set up an appointment at ozarkselderlaw.com at 10 area locations, and then you're going to have some communication, and they're going to give you some, quote, homework, things that they need you to bring to a meeting, and you'll bring that stuff, and that's what's going to allow them to get things started, and then in the end of the beginning, they'll say, all right, here's what you need to do, and to have those legal documents drawn up, this is what it'll cost you to do it, and then you make your decision. ozarkselderlaw.com. I found this story in the New York Post. Democrat congressional candidate in Michigan being roasted online over a series of unhinged TikTok campaign videos that show her twerking, lip-syncing, and posing in front of banners that scream P-word power. Shelby Campbell, a 32-year-old single mom, has flooded her social media with clips of herself dancing, responding to haters, and spouting her political views as part of her campaign for Michigan's 13th congressional district, which includes parts of Detroit and several suburbs. Some of Campbell's more outrageous clips have exploded online in recent days, racking up millions of views as critics claim that she's proof that, quote, Democrats are not sending their best.
She's the one that said the things about Charlie Kirk. We talked about her, and she said something we talked about her a couple weeks ago, too, and I can't remember what she did then. But yeah, same gal. She's really making the headlines.
What is it with Democrat? I'm telling you, if one did not know better, it would be easy to believe that Democrats have a plot to convince people that women should not only not run for office, but should not be able to vote by the people that they put up. Republicans do not. I love how the media just spun itself in circles over, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who Lord knows has had her crash and burn moment. But all the focus on her when you've got gals like Shelby Campbell running around making a mockery of women in politics on the Democrat side. Look at The View. It's as if they handpicked the dumbest broads they could possibly find to broadcast all over the world. You know what people across this world, they see that, they're gonna think that is what is the standard American woman. They hear people like Ocasio-Cortez. They see people like this Shelby Campbell. What an embarrassment. It is. The statement itself, they're not sending their best, is an understatement.
I looked it up. She is the one that is also running out of spite for the former significant other who broke up with her over 10 years ago.
That's right.
Yep.
She did say that she was going, yeah.
Same gal.
What a nut job. She'll probably win the primary. The nuttier they are, the more the Democrats love them. We've got news coming up in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. Springfield's Talk 1041. Good day. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nick Reed. Hour number 2 on a Monday. Oh, is this, oh, no, wait. I gotta look at the calendar. Let's see here. Okay, no, never mind. I didn't know if it was a certain breakfast or not, but that'll be the following week. I'm lost on the calendar. I have no clue what's going on. That's all right. That's okay. The Senate unanimously approved a resolution Thursday to withhold their pay during government shutdown. An attempt to make federal closures financially painful for lawmakers after a string of record-breaking impasses in the past year. I don't like this because I don't believe it works. Now, as it's described here in this AP story, which I think is fair, this is the whole idea, the concept is to make federal closures financially painful for lawmakers. So I went and I got, now, this is from, I think, Mitt Romney's last year, so this is from a couple years ago, but it was list of U.S. senators by minimum net worth. And at the time, at the very top of the list is Rick Scott of Florida, $208.9 million net worth. Now, that's not income. That's assets. That's your net worth. Essentially $209 million. Mitt Romney was at $84.38 million. You got Mark Warner of Virginia, $64 million. Now, if you go to the other end of it, at the time, this was from just a few years ago. Tom Cotton, U.S. Senator from Arkansas, negative $884K. Probably because he owned, mortgage, got some loans out. Now, when we talk about offering up financial pain to elected officials for not doing their job, do we think that Tom Cotton, whose net worth is negative $884K, is going to be in the same financial situation as a Rick Scott at $209 million on the plus side? No. Of course not. This gives power to the wealthier members of Congress because they don't keep my paycheck. That's walking around money for some of these people. But for others, it can be quite devastating. I think it was Rick Scott. And don't get me wrong, I like Rick Scott. I have no trouble with people in Congress having lots and lots and lots of money, as long as, it's all legal. I don't have issues with that. I don't have issues with Rick Scott being a multimillionaire. But if it wasn't him, it was someone else talking about how, one of the other members was complaining about, well, I have a mortgage. And the point was, well, so do TSA workers. Well, yes, that is true. But first off, again, who gets impacted negatively by this? It's actually the people who are more like the average American, financially speaking. Do we really want to have in place a mechanism that puts the financial screws to some members of Congress but doesn't bother the others at all because they don't even notice it? That just doesn't seem like a very good idea. And do we want those who actually are going to be suffering the most, the people who financially are most like you and me? And what if they aren't part of the problem? The last government shutdown that occurred was completely because of Democrats voting to shut it down, over half a dozen times? Partially shut down, partially not fund. Is it really fair to take someone like Tom Cotton, who has a negative net worth, and withhold his paycheck when he was on the side of actually funding things? I don't think so. I understand the concept behind this. I understand that this is something you think, well, we'll show them, we'll make them suffer. The problem is they don't all suffer. And so then that gives undue power to those that are really, really wealthy. That they can essentially hold hostage those who do rely on a paycheck. You know, you think about it, we do because of, you see some of these numbers and the extremely wealthy individuals, particularly when they get into leadership. And we have this mistaken idea that every single member lives high on the hog when oftentimes they don't at all. You may be talking about a family of four with one or potentially two incomes, but you know how much it costs to live in D.C.? You not only have to maintain a home here, but you have to maintain a place to live unless you're going to just live and sleep in your office, which some do. And obviously they're all going to vote for this because what senator wants to be on record voting against it. But this doesn't, when you really look at how it can play out, it doesn't ultimately accomplish what I believe people are hoping it will accomplish, particularly given that the net worth, the net value of these senators span such a tremendous financial spectrum that some of those guys and gals could literally be paycheck to paycheck, while others can miss a year's worth of paycheck and never even notice it. Springfield's Talk 1041, streaming live, KSGF.com. Also on the app. If you don't have it, I recommend that you download that. You can also watch us on YouTube if you look up Springfield's Talk 1041 there. And then we've got the podcast, all those places, as well as Spotify, iTunes. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a chance for showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 85. Tonight, a 30% chance for showers with a low around 70. For your Tuesday, a 90% chance for rain with a high near 79. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly cloudy skies with a high near 67.
Congressman Burleson joining us this morning. How do you do, sir?
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Now that we got that part taken care of. I want to get your thoughts on this, and I was talking about it before, just in the previous segment, and how the Senate voted unanimously to withhold their own pay if there is another government shutdown. And I don't think this is a good idea because different members have much different financial situations. I mean, you have some that do essentially live very tight budgets, essentially paycheck to paycheck, while others are worth multi-millions of dollars. And so that really seems to give a bit of an advantage and leverage to the wealthier members who, if they miss a paycheck or two, it doesn't matter to them. They don't live off that. That's walking around money. But then if you have somebody that really does live meagerly and they haven't been a career politician, they haven't built up all these assets, it puts them at a great disadvantage. What your thoughts on that?
I haven't really thought that through. That's an interesting idea. I do think threatening pay is a good motivator for members of Congress.
Well, I think it depends on the member of Congress. Because I look at Nancy Pelosi, that's walking around money for that. That's ice cream. She doesn't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could certainly probably get quite a bit done, and I know that it would sound a little bit more harsh to do it to not only the member but their staff, because a lot of this is that a lot of these people are ginned up by their staff, right? So look at Joe Biden as perfect example. Do you really think Joe Biden was running the show? Or do you think Chuck Schumer is really running it by himself? A lot of times you get them away from their staff, and they can be a little bit more reasonable, and they depend on their staff.
Right.
So especially the ones that are the swampier they are, the more that they only rely on their staff. I don't know. I think that something needs. What I would like to do is tie your pay to whether or not the budget is balanced.
Right.
Like if we take out any kind of debt, members of Congress should have to pay for that, or have to pay by having a reduced salary. Because you're clear, in my opinion, you're not doing your job. And that's one metric you can.
Yeah. Well, and the other, and the other problem I have with it is that, let's look at the most recent partial shutdown situation. It was clearly one party that was the problem. And I feel like we're almost going back to when the entire classroom got punished because of the behavior of a few. And I think it's fair to also say, well, if you have members that vote constantly to fund, but it's blocked by others, why should those who voted to fund the government and to make sure that those people did get paid, why should they be punished financially as well?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I just had a couple of those good points I thought I'd share.
You're always full of good points.
Yeah. Hey, I saw you made a posting about the interest that we're now paying. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we had a hearing the other day in my committee. It was a roundtable discussion about the debt, and we had two Democrats show up. It was kind of sad, but we had some great witnesses. These guys were three PhDs in economics talking about the impact of the debt and the fact that we are at a place where right now 1/4 of every dollar you send in is just paying interest on the debt. That's really
right.
That's really sad. Really sad. And that if we don't stop this, if we don't really curb spending, we're going to get to a point where half of what you send in is paying the interest alone. At that point, I don't know that there's anything you can do to turn the ship around. I got a text this morning from a longtime friend that was kind of from Jeff City days. He was a really bright guy, former CEO of a healthcare system that was a Mises student, like a guy who was a fan of the Austrian School of Economics
Mm-hmm.
and actually big in the Mises Institute, and he was saying pretty much the same thing, that he doesn't know that he's kind of black-pilled. He thinks that we've kind of already hit
Yeah.
that spending limit.
One of the criticisms that Trump has received, particularly post the engagement with Iran, with that being such a big deal, obviously, and the impact it's having on prices, when it hits energy, it really does hit everything, is that, well, he should be focusing, on the economy. He needs to do more about that. But you take the Iran situation out of it, and he was actually receiving this criticism before that because he was doing a lot of overseas stuff. But I want to give you what my thoughts on that are and then get your thoughts on it. I have felt as if when it comes to the economy overall, Trump as an executive in that first 6 months to a year of the second term pretty much did any and everything that he could, up to and including what he could get out of Congress with the big, beautiful bill. But I think at this point, any sort of other very meaningful positive changes when it comes to the economy really has to come from Congress when it comes to spending, when it comes to, just the spending issue itself. And so it seems to me as if there is almost this desire to kind of maybe after, if the midterms don't go well, Trump should have done more for the economy. But how much of this do you think is failure of Congress to do its job in a meaningful way that results in more positive outcomes in the economy?
Yeah, I think it's probably 80-20 Congress's fault.
Yeah.
And I put a lot of that blame on the Senate because we're passing great legislation out of the House that's not making it through the Senate because of their whole cloture rule and 60 vote threshold and all that. And they can blame Chuck Schumer all they want, but the truth is they're not putting, as we've talked about many times on the show, they're not willing to do the actual work of staying up late at night and making the Democrats filibuster, making them have some kind of level of pain for holding up a lot of these bills. So I don't. Congress. The other thing Congress can do and should do is another reconciliation bill that we could hopefully accomplish a lot of these things that would improve the economy. I think healthcare is at the top of that list. Healthcare reform. You could, if you deregulated the housing industry, for example, if you said these national home building codes, if you stripped out the authority of some of these national home building codes, you would see a revolution in home building construction, because when we have people come and testify, experts that will come and testify, they will have the facts in front of them that point out that 40% or more of the cost of a new home is because of all the regulations they have to deal with. So that, along with if we could make more land available for people to build, when you talk to developers who are looking to build single family homes, they can't find the land that they could get permitted to do that, especially in western states where they're landlocked by a lot of federal land. So there are things that we can do that would dramatically impact the economy, get people building again, get the cost of healthcare down again. There's a lot that Congress can do if we would actually step up to the plate and do it.
We're talking with Congressman Burleson. I've seen what I think is the latest news about Iran, saying that they have another 14-point plan they're going to give to the Pakistanis to give to us, and Trump's like, you better hurry up, time's running out. And I think the thing about where we are now with Iran is we're not seeing things happen in those first days. You saw things occurring. You had the visuals. You would hear about, oh, we took this down and that down. And so there was a sense that there was some progress being made despite Democrats trying to make it sound like we were losing this thing. But now we're not really seeing things happen. It just feels as if we're kind of stuck here, though there was talk a couple of weeks ago about they're going to run out of places to put the oil, and then they're going to be in real trouble. What is going on right now? And what do you think, if anything, is going to be the path forward? Because I'm sure it can't just stay like this.
I think that meeting with China probably had some impact. Although I think most of that meeting was fairly pejorative. It was not. It was all just pomp. I do think China has. I mean, they're the ones that are suffering economically the most from this war, and I think that they have a reason to try to bring it to a resolution and open up the straits more so than anybody. But I also think that Oman, United Arab Emirates, the Saudi Arabia, they've got even more of an interest in opening this up, and I've heard that they potentially might be drawn into a type of kinetic way of stepping in and trying to do actual regime change and take over this from the United States. I would welcome that. I think this is the Arab countries are sick of the Shiite Muslims and what they've done these religious zealots have done to their countries. And so there's a great book called Enemies and Allies that was written about the perspective of these leaders in these other nations that are in the region, and their perspective on the economy and the impact that Iran and the Shia Muslims have had. And it's a negative impact on them in almost every aspect. And so I think that they have all the motivation in the world to want to end the regime in Iran. They just have to balance the Muslim communities in their own nations. And I think that Iran has given them enough reason to mobilize and go in, because Iran was firing rockets at these countries and going after them. So my hope is that we kind of continue the control of the straits, letting out only the ships that we're going to let out, stopping the blockade in Iran, and until these other players step in. That's my hope, that we don't have to spend a whole lot more money on any kind of dropping bombs or anything like that. And I certainly like the fact that Trump has closed the door on quote unquote reparations. That's ridiculous.
Right. Congressman Burleson with us. Before we let you go, anything I'm missing? Final thoughts?
No, we're going to be going in this week. I mean, at a time in which we need to be passing the Safe America Act, at the time in which we need to be fixing healthcare, all of these major things that we're leaving on the table. By golly, we're going to go in and we're going to pass a bill related to try to fix the NCAA or all of the college sports and,
right,
and the advent of players being paid. So
priorities.
That's absolutely top priorities for a lot of my colleagues, is making sure these colleges are not being outspent by their neighboring college. Number one priority.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for being with us as always, and we will talk with you next week. Congressman Burleson, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a chance for showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 85. Tonight a 30% chance for showers with a low around 70. For your Tuesday, a 90% chance for rain with a high near 79. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly cloudy with a high near 67. And wanted to read a review for my friends over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Melissa wrote, "The Pyramid Roofing Company did a fantastic job. It took a while to get booked only because they were so backed up due to all the storm damage around here, but they were very professional. They cleaned up completely and my roof and gutters look awesome." Now, if you do have storm damage, make sure that you reach out to a trusted roofing professional. And my go-to recommendation is always Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, the Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections, financing for the deductible if you need it, and they will meet with your adjuster, so they make sure that everything gets covered that needs to get covered. If it is time to have the Pyramid team out to your home, reach out to Josh today. You can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Thought I'd play President Trump and his reading from 2 Chronicles 7 during the nationwide Bible reading event that took place this past week. A passage organizers noted was deliberately reserved for the president because of its decades-long role as a call to prayer in America. Organizers said that Trump's section was not assigned at random. It had listed prior to the reading that the reading was reserved for a, quote, special guest slot during a prime evening hour on Tuesday. And Bunny Pounds, founder and president of Christians Engaged, said we needed somebody special to read 2 Chronicles, chapter 7. As my director and I were praying over different sections of Scripture, it came to us that this is such a critical passage for the body of Christ. Pounds said the passage, particularly verse 14, has been central to American prayer life for decades, often invoked during times of national reflection. Quote, "It comes at a time when the Israelites were experiencing hardship, and God spoke and said, if my people that are called by my name would humble themselves and pray." We've prayed the Scripture for at least the last 50 years of American history on National Day of Prayer and other moments in the country. And here is it was a video feed directly to the event from President Trump.
He prosperously affected. And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself for a house of sacrifice. If I shut up heaven, that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my eyes shall be open and my ears attent to the prayer that is made in this place. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And as for you, if you will walk before me, as David your father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, and shall observe my statutes and my judgments, then will I establish the throne of my kingdom according to as I have covenanted with David your father, saying, there shall not fail you as a man to be ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I pluck them up from the roots out of my land which I have given them, and this house which I have sanctified for my name will I cast out of my sight, and will make it to be a proverb and a byword among nations. And this house which is high shall be an astonishment to every one that passes by it, so that he shall say, Why has the Lord done thus to this land and to this house? And it shall be answered, because they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, and laid hold on other gods, and worshipped them and served them. Therefore has he brought all this evil upon them.
Now, not that he would have, but I was thinking as he's reading this, like, well, he didn't ad lib any. Even when he has, I mean, clearly he would not ad lib, but you could kind of almost see it because he tends to do that. Even when he has prepared remarks, he'll throw in a comment here or there, or here or there. The event itself, it's just such a stark contrast when you see massive gatherings of people that are religiously based, conservative, specifically Christian, though not isolated to Christianity, versus what it looks like when you have these sorts of gatherings from people on the left. And, just even how the place gets left when people leave. I think it's Reuters had an article noting that critics were talking about separation of church and state and how this was inappropriate. Like everything else for the left, anything is inappropriate if they feel it works against them, though then also appropriate if it can work for them. It was just last week, Ocasio-Cortez was preaching at a church. Democrat U.S. Senator Warnock of Georgia is an actual preacher. But see, he preaches about how evil Republicans are. He preaches about socialism and how horrible Donald Trump is. Every election cycle, every Democrat that is running for higher office, they get invited to some of these churches, particularly in the inner city, and they stand and they preach Democrat policy. I think it's interesting that and I know you all know, separation of church and state is nothing that's in the Constitution. It was a reference, a letter, but not in our founding documents. I do find it interesting that the left doesn't worry itself with separation of church and state when they are using the church to promote government. But reading from the actual Bible itself, they find to be extremely problematic. You see, if the church is government, that should be embraced and promoted. But if you're talking about God, that they find offensive. And that tells us a lot. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. President Trump sat down with Brett Baer and, among other things, was asked about his comments that he made to the Daily Caller White House correspondent Reagan Reese that the financial situation of Americans were not even a little bit of a factor when pressuring Iran to resolve the ongoing conflict with a diplomatic solution. Now, this is a unique situation in which the president is saying something that is 100% the correct approach, but at the same time so easily utilized against him and against Republicans. I want to play the exchange with Brett Baer, and I would argue to Trump's credit, he sticks to his guns on this. Here's the Q&A with Brett Baer on this issue.
Numbers are. You can imagine Democrats and political pundits jumped all over this statement that you made the other day. You were asked when you were leaving.
Think about American financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all.
That's right. That's the perfect statement. I'd make it again.
You can imagine how many people stop the soundbite. I don't think about America's financial situation. So what's your response to that framework?
It's very simple. When people hear me say it, everybody agrees. Short-term pain. It's going to be short-term pain. But the pain is much less than people thought.
Now, I don't know if that's an accurate say. I don't know. Everyone's different. I don't know that people thought about it. I don't even know if that's relevant. The reason that Trump's statement was correct when he made it is because you don't want to broadcast to the enemy. Let's say that Trump is taking that into consideration. You don't want the enemy to know that. Because the enemy, so we just have to drag this thing out. Now, Trump is sacrificing, to some degree, the reputation of prioritizing the American person, the American, financially speaking, quality of life in the name of making sure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. Now, he clearly wants everyone to be better off after he's president than they were before. And he's demonstrated this through what economic policies he could get Congress to cobble together and send to his desk, whether it was the first term with tax cuts or the second term with the tax cuts and the big beautiful bill, and in his capacity, what financial movements he's been able to make. So that is a thing that he cares about. But when you're asked on the world stage, and I say the world stage, it was outside the White House, but it's broadcast all over the world, hey, when you're figuring out how to deal with Iran, do you take that into consideration? The right answer for the audience of Iran is no. Because that would be showing one of your cards. I don't know if it has gotten to that point yet. I suspect not, because I believe Trump recognizes that once this thing gets done, the prices are going to go back to where they were before, perhaps even lower in terms of energy because of some of the subsequent decisions made by some of these other countries, specifically United Arab Emirates, and withdrawing from OPEC. And that this is going to take care of itself. So he doesn't really have to worry about, like right now, a question like that, it's for an audience of Iran. And no, that does not have any impact. Does not matter how, because essentially what he's telling Iran is if you're thinking, as you watch our news broadcast, and you see the news about oil prices going up, gas prices going up, and you see our media broadcasting the increase in prices and talking to people on the street about how it is becoming unaffordable, and you see Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom and other Democrats out there railing on if you think that that is going to have an impact on what I do in dealing with you, you are wrong. You are wrong. Not going to affect me. That's the message that he wants Iran to receive, that I don't care. And that's because he wants and needs and recognizes the significance of having that maximum leverage and not giving the enemy an area in which they think, ooh, there's a soft spot. This is a waiting game. If we can just hold out, make him suffer longer, then if he is going to make that a contributing factor to the decision, then let's use that. Let's lean into that. And he wants to deny them that. And so you just straight up say, it doesn't matter to me. And like I said, the downside is the way that it's going to be utilized. And you can all day long critique a better way of delivery. You could suggest, well, maybe you could have answered it by saying, that's a separate issue, or of course I worry about that, but not in. But he just, I suspect, did not want to give any daylight whatsoever to the Iranians to think that it was even a thought in his mind, almost to come across as cold and indifferent to the plight of the American people, with the end game being wrapping this thing up, knowing that the American people are going to be fine. So a damaging domestic message, potentially, and handing political opposition some ammo. But if that's what it takes in order to get this thing wrapped up, Trump's saying so be it. It's not an easy decision to make. That's for sure. But Trump isn't one that defaults to the easy decisions, particularly when it comes to doing what's best for the country. In his assessment, Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, along with Will, her husband, who handles more of the big ranch, living on lake, huge parcels of earth stuff, and her area of expertise, focusing though she could do both, but more on the not that, live in town or maybe in the nice neighborhood with the white picket fence and neighbors. Either which way, you are covered with his expertise in the acreage, and then hers when it comes to that more suburban life or the city life even. You can read reviews. I recommend that you do that. I also recommend, as she always has, when it comes to picking a realtor, interview 2 or 3. Obviously, you're pretty busy. Most people are, and you don't necessarily have time to interview, but just at least 2. And I recommend you make one of them to be Emily Johnson. And read reviews of people just like you who have utilized her services, and you will find out why it is potentially one of the best decisions you can make when it comes to home buying and home selling. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. A couple text messages talking about salaries and how the Senate had voted to not take a salary during government shutdown, and a text noting Article 1, Section 6, Clause 1, the senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. I suspect, honestly, I have not fine-tooth combed what it was that they passed, but I suspect that they still will get paid. But much like the way that you have some of these government employees that get paid, but they don't get paid until the funds get freed back up or allocated, that's the same way that it would operate with them. So it's more of a withholding temporarily than actual canceling of pay, I suspect. Another saying earlier, Nick talked about cutting congressional salaries when they fail to perform. How about doing away with their big dollar retirement anytime they fail to balance the budget? No balanced budget. All retirement ceases even if out of office, 25% of budget to pay national debt, surely cutting into my retirement. Well, again, you do have this is really the big hang-up I have on it, is that it affects different members disproportionately. Your Nancy Pelosi's couldn't care less. These multi-millionaire elected officials that have spent their time in Congress amassing wealth, that salary to them is walking around money. And that gives them leverage over the members of Congress that are more like you and more like me, maybe some business person or some family person that decided, you know what, I want to run and I'm going to get up there. I'm tired of it being people who are out of touch. And those are the people that it really does hurt. And any effort that has a disproportionate impact based off of the member of Congress and their net worth, I just don't think it's a good idea. It's not effective. And I also just don't like, if I'm a member of Congress and I'm constantly voting to fund this stuff, but I'm on the losing end of it, and then on top of it, even though I'm fighting to make sure people get paid because Congress overall failed to do so, then I have my pay withheld. I don't think any of it ultimately is effective. I don't like to use the word fair, unfair. I just don't believe that it is going to make a difference. The problem, when it comes down to it, it's the voters. Maybe not you and me, but some of them. That's democracy. News in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. Springfield's Talk 104.1. Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Reed. Welcome to the show. I think this may be my favorite article of the day. When was this? This was, this is from today.
Mm-hmm.
Daily Mail, Trump sparks concern as he posts wild image of alien in chains at U.S. Army base. So this is so clearly not real. So clearly not real for a number of different reasons. So the picture, and they acknowledge that in all likelihood, this isn't real. In fact, let me read to you from some of the article. Donald Trump sparked alarm last night by posting an AI-generated image of himself standing alongside a handcuffed alien at a U.S. military base. Trump and his bodyguards flanked the cuffed extraterrestrial in the image, posted on his Truth Social account Sunday. Trump's post, coming days after the White House released new UFO files, was sharply criticized by some commentators, even as they recognized it was probably meant in jest. Eric Weinstein, an investor and mathematician, posted on X, maybe it's real, maybe a head fake, maybe it's awesome AF. But maybe it's dorky dad humor, maybe it's a clever way to prepare the world, etc. What do I believe? That we are here clowning around without full and totally uncontested control of our national defense critical military airspace. Another ex-user saw something more cynical. This is Trump signaling that the discussion around disclosure is total BS and people will volunteer to believe it anyway. A third went further. Quote, our government only tells us a piece of the truth and then manufactures the rest to get us all arguing and fighting. They will never give over information or tech that will take power away from them, while others read it more charitably as just Trump and relax, folks. Now, I will say that there is truth to the fact that every single day, objects that we supposedly don't know what they are, we don't know their origins, are flying over our military installations, our top secret installations, and there is apparently nothing we can do about it. Congressman Burleson, when we actually talked about this last week, and he suggested he thinks part of it is just embarrassment that we don't know what it is, that there is a little bit of nervousness within our government because something is doing this and we don't know what it is. Now, others will say we just want people to think we don't know what it is. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think, however, that the picture's hysterical. I mean, first off, this is okay. So the picture shows them walking on a base, which is fully not inside. Nothing that's inside. I mean, it's out in the open at some U.S. military base. The alien is pretty ripped. He's a bit taller than Trump. What is he wearing? A rope around his
No, he's handcuffed.
I mean, is that really going to hold an alien that's advanced? Is this...
Apparently.
We're not worried about other aliens like doing a rescue mission here.
You're missing the best part. Elon Musk is also in the photo, and so is Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that is. I don't want to miss that. That is a more far away shot. It looks like it's a little bit blurry because I guess you are... I get the impression that this is being secretly taken, and there is what clearly looks like Elon Musk like walking right by the alien, and then Jeffrey Epstein looking figure leading the so I don't know. I'm sitting here saying, well, I don't know why Epstein would be thrown in there. I don't know why this and that. Why is any of it? I mean, this is the sort of thing Trump does, I firmly believe, for his own amusement. Trump is the sort of person that strikes me as getting a kick out of watching particularly Democrats just go nuts over dumb stuff. That's the amusement. Not necessarily over the serious things. And Yes, national security. We are talking about national security implications here. But a photo of Trump and Elon Musk and Jeffrey Epstein and a bunch of other people walking with an alien in the open air at a military base. Something that is so clearly absurd and just like crazy. I believe Trump knows, though. He's like, there are people that are going to get so wound up over this. And I could see him sort of snickering to himself as he posts it because of just that sheer entertainment factor. I could be wrong. You know, maybe this is Trump's way of being like, hey, this is Glurflop, and I've been talking to him for some time. It has been noted, if the existence of aliens in this capacity were something that actually existed, Trump would be the one to expose it. But let's look at this as well. Look how much stuff the deep state has long kept from Donald Trump. You know, we've learned that when it came to certain intelligence in dealing with our foreign adversaries, that particularly during the first term, they withheld that information from him because they just didn't trust him. They didn't like what he might do with it. They, in all of their brilliance, suspected that Donald Trump would somehow blow up the world if he had this sort of information. And so they were keeping legitimate information away from him. I don't know if the same deep state that would keep intelligence from Donald Trump if they would tell him this. Because I imagine for all the information that exists within the deep state, there's a deep state within the deep state. Not everybody with that deep state ID card actually gets to see everything. You know that there's a deep state within the deep state. And maybe there's a deep state within that deep state even. I think for me, when people question whether Trump does or doesn't know things, or is Trump hiding from us the actual existence of aliens, for me, the thing that makes it most unrealistic is the idea that the same people who have withheld information from Trump because they didn't like him, because they're trying to sabotage him, because they felt as if he is some dunderhead that would just somehow accidentally leak it and cause all sorts of national security problems, that this is like the last thing in the world that they would actually ever share with him. That's just an overly simplistic approach on it. Of course, you could have some in the deep state, like, we do need this information to get out. The best way to get it out is let Donald Trump know about it. I just don't happen to lean in that direction. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a chance for showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 85. Tonight, a 30% chance for showers with a low around 70. For your Tuesday, a 90% chance for rain with a high near 79. And taking a look at Wednesday, mostly cloudy skies with a high near 67.
Wanted to share some just update on a race change, as a couple of weeks ago we introduced Ost Family Racing, had in studio, and our partnership with them, and we're geeked about it, being able to now have sort of an insight, if you will, with people in the racing world. And they initially were set to race in Springfield this Saturday, but apparently the Saturday Springfield race has moved to Sunday, so they are going to be racing in Monette this Saturday instead, and then Springfield the following. If you do happen to be at one of the race, run into them, or if you want to follow them, it's AUST Family Racing. They have also teamed up with Quick Draw Gun to raffle off an AR-15 for the 2026 racing season. Tickets $5 or $6 for $20. Now until the Turkey Bowl in November, and you can, if again you happen to be at a race and see them there, you could go ahead and purchase raffle tickets that way, or you can directly message them through their Facebook page. Again, it's AUST Family Racing. Well, we have that posted somewhere. We've got that posted somewhere,
Yep,
right?
we'll have it up at ksgf.com.
And so then you can make a purchase some of those raffle tickets if you'd like to, and then also follow where it is that they'll be every weekend as we join them and cheering them on as they make their way through the racing season. We've got traffic update now. I'm Nick Reed. Well, now the press is claiming Kash Patel desecrated a historic war site. This regarding Pearl Harbor. So Kash Patel was over there in Hawaii, and apparently part of the time it was vacation, some of the time it wasn't. What it all boils down to is apparently if you are someone that is, somewhat highly connected, either in the military or in our government, you are allowed to get a view of Pearl Harbor and the memorial that others aren't, and that is to get sort of an underwater view by way of snorkeling. These are very controlled situations that are not open to the public. It's nothing unusual. This has been going on for some time. it to some degree reminds me a bit of the time that state lawmaker asked me if I wanted to go up to the very top of the Capitol in Jeff City. And, it's not the sort of thing that's open to the public, but if you were with someone who has access to that, then you can be given a sort of little special tour, if you will. Now, this clearly is something, much different and takes it's not nearly as common, I should say. It's similar in fashion. But the media is trying to essentially make it sound as if Kash Patel was on vacation and make it sound like he's out there drinking White Claws while snorkeling around with his buddies at the Pearl Harbor Memorial. Red State has a story noting that for the latest, Patel allegedly desecrated the site of the Pearl Harbor Memorial, the site of the sunken USS Arizona. Based on the reactions across social media, you're led to believe Patel was in a pool float with zinc oxide on his nose and slamming hurricanes while taking a dip at the historic site. The media coverage, notable in that it heightens the visit as outrageous, has the expected voices of outrage from convenient experts and only lightly touches on the disqualifying details of the trip. Let's strap on the dive fins and jump right into the mess. The histrionics began with the Associated Press report. When Kash Patel visited Hawaii last summer, the FBI took pains to note the director was not on vacation, highlighting his walking tour of the Bureau's Honolulu field office and meeting with local law enforcement. Left out of the FBI's news release was an exclusive excursion that Patel took days later when he participated in what government officials described as a VIP snorkel around the USS Arizona, an outing coordinated by the military. The sunken battleship entombs more than 900 sailors and Marines at Pearl Harbor. Of note is the use of the term VIP snorkel in the headline. It is something that needs to be mostly avoided in order to build up the offensiveness. Another reveal is seen in this sentence, quote, with few exceptions. Snorkeling and diving are off limits around the USS Arizona. Now, this is a curious little qualifier included there. So we have an admission that this takes place on occasion, something indicated by the exclusion or the inclusion that this was a VIP venture, indicating official oversight. The New York Times also got in on the outrage, and it too had to grudgingly provide that Patel was not exactly crashing the site in neon dive masks after taking his jet ski out to the location. Writing, the FBI noted that Admiral Samuel Papero Jr., head of the United States Indo-Pacific Command, invited Patel to Pearl Harbor. The idea of a high-ranking government official receiving an escort from the SEALs for a recreational swim near the tomb is horrifying, said William McBride, a Navy veteran and professor emeritus of history at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. So, again, this is something that is not an unusual occurrence if you are, certain government officials. Even the Associated Press noted still, since at least the Obama administration, the Navy and the Park Services has quietly allowed a handful of dignitaries, including military and government officials responsible for management of the memorial, to swim at the site. Like most selective outrage from the media, this is something that has been going on through past administrations, Republicans and Democrats. And listen, this is not an outrage, whether it was during or when it did happen during the Obama administration, or if it happens during the Trump administration. This is a historic site. And virtually every historic site, there are going to be certain people that have access to it in a way that others don't. Particularly if you're head of the FBI. Would we think anything of it if James Comey had, he may have been one of the individuals that in the past has been able to get a more up close and different perspective than other people in the general public are allowed to have. This would be no different than if you find out Giuliani is given access to an area of the 9/11 memorial that other people aren't generally allowed to have. I'm sure that there are areas within the 9/11 memorial that aren't fully open and accessible to the average person. But if you are a foreign dignitary or you are somebody that is connected to the military or a current administration, you're probably allowed to get a special tour. This goes back to a pattern of criticism of Kash Patel. And it's all criticism that is separate from the actual results of his time so far at the FBI. There was a report that was released, I think it was like a 1-year report of his time there. Maybe it was submitted to Congress. We went through it at the time, and it was critical of Kash Patel in a number of areas, but not in areas that actually had to do with results. So in other words, one of the big complaints was Kash Patel arrived at some event, maybe it was the Charlie Kirk assassination or somewhere, and he didn't want to get off the plane until he had an official FBI jacket. Now, is that true? Don't know. Is it petty? Don't know. But it's a personality thing. He has received a lot of criticism and a lot of anonymous sources claiming that he just really loves to be out there in front of the cameras. Okay. The latest round of anonymous sources claiming that he has a drinking problem and sometimes they can't find him. All of these things aren't about the actual, the performance of the job. This is yet another example. And it suggests to me, when you have all of these sources that are anonymously giving stories to the press about his cattiness when it came to not having an FBI jacket, his insecurity when it comes to this, his drinking problem, him getting a special VIP tour of a site of American history. These are all about personality. Even when it comes to the accusations of drinking, there haven't been any accusations of how it has impacted or negatively affected the FBI. In that report that was released, very critical of him in a lot of these areas, however far back it was, the report itself acknowledged that, when it came to actually focusing on legitimate crime issues, it's kind of nice that the FBI has gotten back to that. Instead of chasing down white supremacists everywhere that didn't actually exist, refocusing on human traffickers and child molesters and drug lords. And the media not being able to complain about a lack of results. It would be a entirely different and legitimate situation if suddenly we're seeing a drop in arrest and apprehensions of murderers and rapists. And prior to Kash Patel, there was a certain number of human traffickers that were constantly being caught and held accountable. But ever since Kash Patel got in there, suddenly that's not happening anymore. Those would be legitimate discussions to be having. The fact that virtually every scandalous story that gets written about Kash Patel has nothing to do with any of that. tells us that they must be having a very difficult time finding legitimate reasons to complain about him. And that isn't to say that some of the criticisms that have been lobbed at him aren't legitimate or valid, but we have certainly seen, based off results, an FBI that is functioning in a much more effective law and order fashion since he has taken over. And if that means coming along with it is a few extra press conferences and Kash Patel wanting to do a VIP snorkel, okay, I'm good with that trade-off. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Coming up, I want to play some audio. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche acknowledging that there's a ton of evidence that the 2020 election was in fact rigged, and there may still be people held accountable for it. So we'll have that audio coming up. Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor, any of your hardscaping, landscaping needs, your lighting needs for your home, your business, your drainage needs, hardscaping, the streaming ad. Those of you who are listening on the stream, you probably hear Daniel Hunter talk about hardscaping and exactly what it is. And that's what I consider to be the foundational stuff. You know, you get the retaining walls, you get for us, it was a patio and a fire pit. And then, of course, you have the landscaping, which is more of the living things, of course, and the mulch and so forth. And it just really levels things up. And if you want it done by the absolute best, Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. If you want the cheapest, go elsewhere. If you want to hire a crew that does about 1,000 different things, maybe none of them as a premier focus, but they're able to get things done more quickly, maybe you sacrifice a little bit of quality, then Hunter Hardscapes is also not for you. But if you want the best, and I'm letting you know now that you're not going to be getting it installed in a month from now. It's going to take a little bit of time because of the planning, because of the expertise, and because of the high demand of those who do it the best. It's Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. You can find them under Nick's endorsements, KSGF.com.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll have a chance for showers and thunderstorms throughout the day with a high near 85. Tonight, a 30% chance for showers with a low around 70. For your Tuesday, a 90% chance for rain with a high near 79. And for Wednesday, mostly cloudy with a high near 67. And Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air, as you just heard, summer is slowly creeping in there. And if you have noticed issues with your cooling system, now is the time to reach out to Russell and have them get out to your home before it gets, super duper hot. The best part about the Foreman team is they are not pushy and they won't try to upsell you. And I know this to be true because before I finally upgraded, my previous unit was 28 years old. But that being said, I did finally upgrade about a year ago, and I can tell a tremendous difference in my home. I no longer have uneven heating and cooling in my home. It's a lot quieter and a lot more energy efficient. And I'm just really happy about the work that the Foreman team did out at my home. If it is time to have the Foreman team out to your home, whether it be for a repair or maybe you're like me, maybe it's time for a new unit install, reach out to Russell today. You can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche was on with Marina Bartiromo on Fox News Sunday Morning Futures on Fox. And he's developed a bit of a reputation as getting things done that Pam Bondi wasn't. Whether that's fair, this is something that has given some people hope. And he was talking yesterday with Marina specifically about the 2020 election.
She just said that we're going to find out that President Trump actually did win certain states in the 2020 election. Now, the president says all the time that the election was rigged. What have you done about that? Do you have any evidence that the election was rigged? What can you tell us?
Well, there's a ton of evidence that the election was rigged. That's not something the DOJ needs to tell you about. There's been evidence about that for many, many years. What I can tell you is that we have multiple investigations going on in Arizona, in Georgia, in Fulton County, Georgia, and that's exactly what we're looking at. By the way, this is very difficult because they're very good. They're very good at hiding up misconduct and hiding what they're doing. And so that's why we're very focused on finding out whether the right people voted, whether people who were supposed to vote voted, whether there was one vote cast per voter. And that's what we're doing in multiple states. And I expect, and again, people, you'll say to me, how long has it taken? Why is it taking so long? And the reality, the answer to that is because it takes a lot of work to uncover what happened in 2020. It takes a lot of good old-fashioned law enforcement police work, which is what we're doing, and we have great prosecutors working on it as well. And I expect that, and I assure the American people that as soon as we have something to say for it, whether it's charges, whether it's a report, whether it's the results of an investigation, the American people will learn about what we've uncovered.
All right. We'll see. This is one of the great frustrations of so many Americans. It is the promise that there will be new information with the suggestion people will be held accountable, and we'll see. I do want to just mention before I play some of the other audio, including his comments about James Comey, one of the messaging tragedies of that particular election had to do with Georgia and the now known to be illegal recording in which Donald Trump talked about finding 10,000 votes. And this has falsely been portrayed as Trump telling the Secretary of State to find Trump votes, to just find some ballots like the Democrats do, just fill them out and stuff. All we need is 10,000. That is not what that conversation was about. There was a conversation that was referencing the law that requires potential recounts in the context of fraud in Georgia, where if a certain percentage of ballots are seen as suspicious, they don't even have to be proven to be illegal, but for example, if a ballot comes in and it doesn't have the right signature, or it's missing a signature, or anything that would be regarded as, okay, there could be something wrong with this. I believe it had to do with like 10% of a previous vote, but there's some sort of calculation that noted if the Secretary of State's office were to identify that percentage amount, then that would automatically, by law, activate an investigation. And Trump was noting that his people had already, just through observations, found like over 100,000 ballots that were questionable. And what Trump was telling the Secretary of State is, we know that there are tons of questionable ballots. You just need to find this amount. Just find this amount. Again, it was referencing to trigger the investigation. That was not Trump telling the Secretary of State to find Trump votes. It was to open your eyes and acknowledge the votes that have come in that are questionable, so that there can be an investigation. Now, it was just revealed a couple of weeks ago, I believe, that in fact that conversation, it was recorded by, I forget the gal's name. I think she worked for the Secretary of State. She was in Florida at the time it was recorded, which made it illegal. Now, whether she's going to face any sort of accountability, and this could be part of what the acting attorney general is talking about here, holding some of these people accountable. She was a Republican, by the way. We're going to take a break and then play a couple of other bits of audio from the acting attorney general. One, Marina asked him the question of statute of limitations. You know, it seems like these things keep missing the statute of limitation. And also, James Comey, he out there, of course, is still playing the dumb guy that had no clue what those seashells meant and had nothing to do with them whatsoever, and whether he faces any sort of real-life repercussions because of any violation of the law there. And he answers that, too. Coming up, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. The lovely Andy with Springfield Livestock Marketing Center joined us on Friday out at Scramblers, and one of the things that she mentioned was the big upcoming 2-day horse sale. Now, that sale will be May 29th and the 30th. On that Friday, they will start with saddles at 5 p.m. with horses to follow, and then on Saturday, they will start at 9 a.m. with tack. 1 p.m. they will have outside items, so think of things like trailers, horse-drawn items, and then at 5 p.m. they will have mules and gaited horses up for sale. So once again, that 2-day sale will be on the 29th and the 30th, but in the meantime, to check out other upcoming sales out there at Springfield Livestock, visit their website, click on that calendar of events, springfieldlivestock.com, and of course you can find all of their contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at KSGF.com.
Sunday Morning Futures host Maria Bartiromo talking with the acting attorney general. Blanche, and one of the questions she asked was about Russian collusion and all of these people that conspired to overthrow the presidency and prior to that rig the election by creating this Russian hoax, and whether or not people are going to be held accountable, and the issue of statute of limitations.
As the statute of limitations run up, do you have no more wiggle room in terms of zeroing in on things like the Mueller report, the Nunes report, and all the evidence that was clear that they knew that there was no Russia collusion?
Look, I don't know that the statute has run out. I don't think so. Because what you saw a continued effort all the way up until very recently, up until the raid of Mar-a-Lago just a couple of years ago, a continued effort to destroy President Trump. And whether that's one conspiracy that continued from 2015, 2016, all the way up to 2023 is what we're looking at right now. But the way that we do that is with the grand jury process. So it's calling witnesses, it's looking at documents, it's having prosecutors study, it's having the FBI look at it and investigate what happened. And we're finding out some incredibly troubling things. And at some point at the right time, that will be made public. And the American people will see exactly what happened to this administration and President Trump over the past decade.
Well, I mean, the country was ripped apart. We all know that. Half of the country said he colluded with Russia. The other half said, no, it didn't. I mean, it ripped the country apart. But you say when the time is right. When is the time right? When should we expect these charges of conspiracy?
Well, I mean, look, as has been publicly reported, the Southern District of Florida has an open criminal investigation. That involves hundreds of subpoenas. It involves hundreds of witnesses. And so as far as timing and when we can expect it, we are working hard and we are working efficiently, but we are going to do it right. We are not going to rush something that isn't ready. We're not going to reach a conclusion before our investigation is over. But I assure you, and I assure the American people, that we are completely focused on it.
Again, we'll see. He could be 100% on point, legit on this, but the problem, the public relations frustration that I'm sure, is having to deal with is the American people saying, well, we've heard this before. So far, the only attempt to, of any significant degree, hold the big players accountable has been this James Comey thing with the seashell stuff. And for a lot of folks, that seems like the least of the concerns when it came to James Comey and his presiding over an FBI when it was spying on Trump and knowing that the Russian collusion thing was something paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. I mean, he was all part of this conspiracy. And as she noted, tore the country apart. And there's still a lot of Democrats who believe it still, even though it's been proven that it was untrue and that it was something paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign, which she herself admitted, saying, well, that's just standard opposition research. And then she tried to blame it on John McCain because, McCain had his own opposition research going on, and then Hillary Clinton kind of took it over and paid for the Russian collusion component to it. But this isn't anything that has even been denied. James Comey and the seashell question. And this is Acting Attorney General Blanche's response to that.
Now, there are charges against Comey right now, threatening the president, transmitting a threat across state lines because of that Instagram post, 8647. Is that real, or is that a placeholder, or what exactly is the charge? Because he's saying this has no merit.
Well, I mean, he's entitled to say whatever he wants. What the facts show is that a grand jury, this isn't a D.C. grand jury. This isn't Todd Blanche, former President Trump's personal attorney, bringing charges. These are line prosecutors, career prosecutors in North Carolina who investigated what happened, investigated this case for nearly a year, and a grand jury returned an indictment. There is nothing more serious in this country, as we've seen repeatedly over the past several years, than threatening President Trump. He has been, on multiple occasions, 3 occasions at least, someone has tried to kill him, okay? So we have to take these threats seriously, and obviously Comey's entitled to his day in court. He is a defendant. He's charged in an indictment out of North Carolina, and those charges are very serious.
And Comey is out there over the weekend hilariously criticizing the Trump administration of weaponizing the justice system against him. Oh, boy. I don't want to be cynical, and this is the challenge that I have internally when my instinct is to dismiss what the acting attorney general is saying because of the fact that we have all heard all of this before, is because, let's say that it is the acting attorney general, or there is that one person that does get in there and they really, truly, genuinely are going to do everything they can to make it happen. It seems really unfair to be dismissive of that person. How frustrating would that be? You get in there and the American people are clamoring for people to be held accountable, and they continue to get disappointed over and over again. And you think, here I come along and I say, okay, we're going to do it. And then I just get dismissed as, oh, yeah, right, we've heard this before. So that would be very frustrating. I suppose everyone who steps up to the microphone and says, oh, don't worry, we're working on this, deserves to be given the benefit of the doubt at least once, and the acting attorney general would qualify for that as well. And like we have said many times, we shall see. Salon Magazine has a headline, "The New Helen of Troy is Black, and that's upsetting racist." No, not really. I think it's just upsetting people who are constantly having people on the left rewrite the classics, retroactively changing aspects of the main characters, which oftentimes are race-related. It's exhausting. I suspect that most racists probably aren't overly concerned about the upcoming epic, The Odyssey. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that this isn't some film that they have been clamoring for a remake, and now they're upset because, as a racist, it is not going to be the traditionally portrayed white character, but instead they're going to go all the way to the extreme, and they are going to pick somebody that is a very dark-skinned, a black person. They are also going to, apparently they've cast Ellen Page, who became a guy, as Achilles. And of course, this will give them the opportunity to cry about transphobia. How about we just stop changing things? You want to come up with new stuff? You want to come up with some new epic story of the ages that involves people that are marginalized or whatever you want to qualify them as, and go right ahead. Knock yourselves out. And this isn't it's not the anger that people on the left think it is. It's just annoying. It's very annoying because guess what? Now it's not about the story. It's about redefining some of the characters of the classics. And in all likelihood, it will not do that well because people don't want to have this stuff, crammed down their throats. Normal people don't. Glenn Beck's coming up next. I'm Nick Reed.